Hey everybody. Hey Mike, how are you?
I'm swell. How you doing, Bob?
Good. Welcome everybody to the Pop Culture SquadCast live. This is our 50th episode live doing this together. I'm very
It
excited
says
about it.
on the crawl, it's a spectacular 50th episode, and I'm glad you didn't reverse that order. Because if it was the 50th spectacular episode, that would be
Listen,
saying
it's
a
a
lot.
splash episode, right? It's a splash. It's the 50th splash episode. Why splash? Did you know? So for those who aren't aware, like the anniversary issues of comics, especially with Marvel and DC in the 60s, 70s, were called splash issues. Do you know the genesis of that? Where that came from?
Probably a lack of imagination. Um, splash pages is that big page at the beginning of the story.
Yeah,
Usually a big one panel opener. Sometimes it's on page 3. So, those are called splashes. The idea is, to suck people in, but invariably suck new readers in. Invariably, those anniversary issues end a story and not start a story.
yeah.
So, from a marketing perspective, I always thought that was kind of screwy.
I think I got it wrong. Actually, I think it's Smash. It's Smash episode. Smash issue. Is it Smash issue?
I hadn't heard
I don't
that.
know. This is something for Ed Cato.
But I haven't
He's
heard.
he's a huge fan of those anniversary issues. Ed Cato is definitely the one to talk to about that.
Oh yeah, sure. There was a time when if you made 50 issues, you were doing great, and that those times are back now because
yes, they are.
They stop and renumber because I am convinced that very few people, particularly at DC and Marvel, know how to count past about 12. They can count from 1 to 12. I'm not sure what they're using to mark 11 and 12. I get the first 10, and that's
there's a way you can use your fingers to get into like a 12. I don't know how to do it.
Great. Now I'll be up all night trying to work that one out.
Don't worry about that. This is a big episode. We have a fantastic guest. Karen Green is going to be joining us. I am very excited to have this conversation. She has got so much knowledge, and she's such an important part of comics history, and her work is very important to preserving that comic history. So I'm very excited for that. We're going to have her on just shortly. What do you want to do first? Oh, Danny's watching. Well, hey Danny, welcome. Hope you enjoy it. You want to do news first? You want to do new number ones first? Because there's only a couple of new number ones I want to talk about, but they're all things I think you'll like.
Let's do news first because news sounds like it's more important.
Okay, it is. Let's the big news of the week, the big news that hit the comic community in this week, is that caused enough concern. And I'm sure you were glad we were going to get to this. Is Lumi AI is a company that has a very, very big name investor. That investor is Colin Kaepernick. And this company is seemingly intent on democratizing storytelling. That is the words that they used. They want to have everyone have the ability to eliminate the gatekeeping in making their own story and comic. They want people to have easy access to digital and physical completion of their comic books without having delays and gatekeepers. And what that means, and what they've been very explicit about, is using an AI generated model that will help the creator create this comic. Obviously AI is a big buzzword. It's most people who talk about it don't know what it means. But to his credit, to some degree, Kaepernick, as he was building this company, reached out to some important creators, some creators of color, friends of ours. And I'm going to read a statement that was made by Kari Randolph, who is a fantastic artist, but also a wonderful person. And what he said is, to be clear, I was I was one of a number of artists that had meetings with Colin a few months ago. He told me broadly what his AI platform was about. He mentioned that it was about removing gatekeepers and how he wanted to benefit people from underserved walks of life. I told him that while I was a fan of his, I couldn't support this because those gatekeepers were people like me who had put our blood, sweat, and tears into our craft. Hard work, a pencil, and paper is all you need to make comics. I let I let him know that this product was going to hurt us long term. So if anyone is asking whether Colin Kaepernick is aware of the misgivings artists have with AI, please believe that he has been made aware, and I know for a fact that I'm not the only one who did so.
Yeah. I'm in favor of artificial intelligence in a non-humorous, generic way. I think
Sure.
it's been around for a long time. I mean, it's gotten better and more threatening. It's great for medicines and things like that. And, that's terrific. It's no better than a photocopier for an artist or for an artist wannabe or for somebody who isn't an artist but wants to use other people's work in order to say they're an artist. And they have more manipulative abilities without looking childish, but it's still not their work. It's just that simple. It's right. People spend their lives developing their skill. Most artists I know, this is true for writers as well, and it's true for me as well, don't really spend a lot of time looking at their old stuff because we all have grown past it. We've gotten better, or at least different, or we've evolved in different ways. That's usually for the better. Sometimes it makes your career. I guess occasionally it could ruin it, but it's still an evolutionary step. AI denies you growth because you're using other people's work.
Right. I mean, one of the biggest things that people who are unfamiliar with this is that all of the big learning engines that are out there that people are using to generate artificial intelligence content have been scraping the internet for years. They are pulling from other work and creating it. I mean, I saw a very horrible AI generated picture of Donald Trump and like four women of color, like saying that black women like Trump, and it's like there's like 8 fingers on each hand, and this was from like 2 days ago, and it's because it's pulling from other things and it doesn't know how to draw like a human, and that's good and okay. One of the things that was brought up about this is that another artist friend of ours, Ray Height, said Colin Kaepernick missed an incredible opportunity by employing all the black artists he tapped and chatted with before this announcement. He would have helped less experienced people, people of color writers create comics, inspiring millions. He chose AI, a soulless tool that taking more than it gives. And then that's the point. The point is that you want to invest in people of color, and you want to invest in having them be able to tell their stories and their experiences. And there are ways to do that by supporting them and empowering them without employing a tool that takes the money out of other people's hands.
Right. There are no shortcuts to that evolutionary process I mentioned beforehand. You have to do it one day at a time, one step at a time. And if you want to be an artist, you're going to perfect your craft as you go along. You're going to learn. I have advised over decades of looking at portfolios, which is not as bad a job as I make it sound, because I'm not at a convention right now. You're looking at stuff and you give people advice or maybe some books they should read if they're young. The young ones, I don't think this will change much until they get older, but learn anatomy. Don't
Right.
expect a computer to do your anatomy for you. It's not going to work, because then it won't be your anatomy. It'll be the computer's reality.
Right.
It's not your stuff. You're just a button pusher.
Listen, my day job is very technical. I work with computers and networking all the time. I am very aware of technical things, and when technical things invade this world, I have perspective to talk from. You know, for a long time I've been force fed the concept of machine learning, and there is a lot that is good about that. Figuring out having machines figure out predictability and things like that is great, but it is not a soul filled creator of art, and I think that art is the wrong place for that.
I agree.
Whether it's drawn, like visual art, or prose art. I just want to. I'm going to get back to that. One of the other things that I ran into, kind of preparing for this, and not really preparing for this, but just being inundated with everybody's stories. Someone had said, and it was Michael Conrad, friend of the show, said he wasn't necessarily worried about AI in his role as a writer, because he doesn't think, and I hope he's right about this, but he doesn't think that AI would be able to generate fear the way a human can.
Yeah,
Because
got an infinite number of monkeys to prove him wrong.
Well, his point was, and I'm going to quote him a little bit here. He said, you have a pain in your side, and you in your mind go through all this. Is it some growing creature that's going to explode? Is it cancer? And he doesn't feel like AI could capture that human fear, which is a great way of saying things. But again, I don't want him doing that. I don't want an artificially programmed story. I think that part of what this company that they're doing, and this is one example, is the storytelling is part of the process. I think that someone comes up with an idea, plungs in the idea, boom, you get a script. Plug that script into the art engine, boom, you get art, and now you had an idea, and now you have a comic book.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I would trust a computer to advise me with respect to background information as to the potential success of a new project. They can analyze that.
Mhm.
That's an analytical process. I would still want to ask it questions. I guess you could program it to reject my snarkiness, but you could. I'd still want to ask questions, and that can be done under certain circumstances, and that's fine. That's analytical. It's not artistic. I don't want to hear the next Beatles song. Thank you. The next Beatles song will come from AI, and that's true for anybody I can mention there. I mean, the next Louis Armstrong. Louis Armstrong's not dead. We've got computers. Now, there's something wrong with that.
Well, yeah, there is that. There's that. It's an interesting time we live in. It appears like nobody watched 2001.
It's an old movie.
I understand that the people who were making it were there, saw that, So, it is.
Yeah, not all of us understood it. But
that's true too.
We saw it.
It's definitely a topic, and hopefully, and I don't think it's going to go away. It is the moment, everyone was up in arms, and who knows where this one company will go. Hopefully, people will hear the concerns, and maybe we can find a way to alleviate those concerns going forward. But it is definitely something that we want to make people aware of, that it's out there. If you haven't heard, this is the story of the week, pretty much in the comics community.
Well, there's a broader issue here.
Sure.
And this issue has been going on since the French started shoving their shoes inside machinery, which was a big thing 150 years ago. Does machinery, and computers are machines, replace people? Now, so far, in the aggregate, you can make a good argument that it actually can create more jobs for people, for humans. And often that's true. In the creative industries, though, which sounds like an oxymoron and probably is, it doesn't work because creativity is a nuanced product. And your internal nuances when you're creating change every second.
I agree with you. I think it's a conversation that we're going to continue to have. I appreciate your thoughts on it.
One question though, Lumi, Lumi, isn't that like some high end all body deodorant or something?
It's not high end, but it's for your butt crack.
Oh, I see.
Your pits, under boob, butt crack. That's what Lumi's for. It's got the same name. It does have the same name, but yes.
Yeah, that's the first thing I thought when I heard about this.
Absolutely.
Like, why did they choose that name? Did a computer choose that name?
I don't know. Next topic. We're going to move on because I do want to get to our guest fairly soon. Next topic is Batman Cape Crusader. It released last week, I think on Thursday or so. It is, maybe you can explain why Batman Cape Crusader, which is owned by Warner Brothers Discovery, is being broadcast on Amazon Prime, but it is.
Oh, I can explain that. That's easy.
Okay.
If you watch, and you may have to remember back in the good old days when we had broadcast television, networks, NBC, ABC, you would see a Warner Brothers TV show or movie on a network owned by Universal or owned by Paramount or whatever. They would sell them that movie. They might even co-produce that TV show with you. To a certain extent, they're definitely putting money into it. So they're used to dealing with that. Now, when HBO Max, which was a stupid name, but God damn it, they found a stupider one. When that started, they consumed this DC service. So we were watching DC to watch all this brand new programming, and this website this streaming service was going to be one-stop shopping for all DC video.
Sounds great to me.
And I thought, wow, that's a cool idea. Okay, they were doing comic books on there too, which was silly, but okay, you learn, live and learn. Now, if I want to watch, and this is true for Paramount, Star Trek, and everything else, but if I want to watch DC material, then I've got to go look at Amazon Prime, and I have to look at HBO and not just Max, which are two separate things this week, maybe not next. Different shows are on different services. So if I was paying $15 a month, and I'm just pulling that, to watch all this DC stuff, and I still have that same idea in mind, this is equally true for Marvel. I'm now spending 3 times as much because I have to subscribe to several different services.
I'm waiting for you to tell me how this is a good thing.
Oh, it's not, because the streamers don't have a clue and they don't know how they're going to stay in business. Outside of Netflix and to a lesser extent Amazon Prime. Amazon Prime is Amazon's trying to screw the pooch at a point in time when people don't like them as much as they used to. The others don't know if they're going to be in business next year at this time or 6 months from now.
Sure.
If they are going to be in business, who's going to own them? And if they get bought, and many will be, or will merge in one form or another, will those people have a job? And the way Hollywood works is you buy a company, you bring in your management, and everything that the old management did is shit canned.
Well, that's how everything kind of works. So let's let's talk about the show. Let's
Okay.
talk about what do you? I'm gonna go first really quick and say I love it. It is exactly what I wanted it to be. It is the heir to Batman the Animated Series, which is very easily, arguably, one of the best cartoon series of all time. It is wonderful.
I agree, and they've got great people working on it. And bringing Ed Brubaker in is just a genius.
Yes.
I've only seen the first two because I don't watch shows in bulk.
Right,
For me, at least, it does a disservice to the writer.
I have watched the first 5. I'm halfway through. I think Hamish Linklater has done a fantastic job as Batman / Bruce Wayne. I think
absolutely agreed. I absolutely agree. The voice cast is wonderful.
It is fantastic. I want to, especially Dietrich Bader as Harvey Dent has been fantastic. The Crystal Joy Brown as Barbara Gordon is wonderful. I think that Jamie Chung as Harley. You haven't gotten in, but Dr. Harleen Quinzel as you get through, she's a pip. It's very fun. It's very enjoyable. It's interesting to watch. It's not something that you have to watch episode after episode after episode, and it leads to. I mean, like there seems like there's a very loose, longer plot that I'm enjoying. But
I hope so, and that would be nice.
But it's not. It is singular episodes. Some things I think kind of will come back later on, but it's like a comic book. This villain is here, and that villain might come back later on with something else. Something might get set up and come back later. But it's not like if you don't watch this, if you watch episode 4, you must have watched episode 3. You don't have to do that necessarily. So I really enjoy that.
I do want to put a caution on that, which is if you get invested in where a show is going, a streaming show is going, and you get to the end of the year and they've wrapped up a lot of the loose ends, they've held some others for the next season, they've set up some stuff, you don't know where it's going to go, don't get too invested in it. Because most streaming shows do not last more than 2 years. A great many don't last more than 1 year. They don't save themselves on the schedule by attracting viewers. They keep on the schedule. They're kept on the schedule because they're attracting new viewers. And old shows continuing do not necessarily attract new viewers. So what you see are some ridiculous things like Star Trek Lower Decks, which I love, ending at 5 seasons. That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous.
Is it over? Is it ended? I didn't realize it was
one more season. One more season. And you look at the show we were just talking about off air.
Orville.
Yeah. Orville. Orville's coming back. They're going back into production in January. Okay, I loved Orville. I thought it was wonderful. I thought it was the best Star Trek ever, actually. And it's been 4 years since it will be 4 years since the show was last.
I guess it has. It's been a while.
Maybe. Yeah, I don't know. Pre-COVID. That's all I can think of.
Okay.
Pre-COVID. That's how I define life.
Sure. Well, it's when is post-COVID? That's where you put the lines, like because San Diego Comic-Con might just change name to COVID Comic-Con. At this point.
Yeah.
All right. We need to bring in our guest.
We do.
I think we both recommend Batman Cape Crusader. If you are a fan of Batman the Animated Series, you will enjoy this show. If you are a fan of Batman, it is a very good Batman story.
I've seen a little of What If season 3, very little. And
is that out? Is that fully out?
No,
right?
No.
Okay.
No. It's I think it's still in production, but who knows? And I'm very excited for it. I think they have to make some changes because of the whole Kang thing.
Yeah.
But I'm very disappointed that this is likely to be the last year unless somebody else decides to come up with a wad of money.
Well, hopefully we can hope. I want to bring in our guest. Um, our guest is Karen Green. She is the curator for comics and cartoons at Columbia University. That is a cool thing. That is enough to be very cool. Since 2005, she has been instrumental in building a collection, an archive that now includes original art and papers for Chris Claremont, Al Jaffe, Howard Cruz, Jerry Robinson, S. Clay Wilson, Wendy and Richard Peeney, Kitchen Sink Press, and I've been told that the Simonsons are coming as well. And she is she's been a judge at the Eisner. She's been a judge at Pulitzer Prize of Editing Cartooning. She co-produced the documentary She Makes Comics, which we are going to talk about, and we're going to bring her in. And I'm very excited for everyone to meet Karen Green. Welcome.
Hi, guys.
Good
Thanks
evening,
for
Karen.
having me.
We're so happy to have you.
I got to say something here.
Go ahead.
We've had at least 50 guests, more so. And many of them are friends of mine, people I've known for a while. Some are people I'm really glad to meet, some people whose work I really enjoy. I've wanted you on this show more than anybody. For
That is
one
true.
reason. This is the truth. Bob
is
will
true.
back me up.
That is true.
Because I envy you. Of all the jobs in the greater comics business, you got the coolest by far, and you've done the best with it. So now let's spend the next hour and a half with you living up to that.
I would posit that the ladies of the Billy Ireland have just as cool, if not cooler, a job as I did. But I do have the benefit of having started things.
I just got confirmed that I'm going to go to Columbus for GalaxyCon this year. So I am definitely going to make it a chance. I did not get a chance. I went last year, and I'm definitely going to make it a point to go do that this year.
Good.
I was talking to Ron Mars, last week or so, and he went and experienced it and was definitely making a point that I should do that.
I've lost
tour of the stacks.
What's that?
Be sure and get the grand tour of the stacks.
I will try. I will try.
Stagger you.
So beyond that, you have amassed this collection. I wanted to talk about that first, and what inspired your work at Columbia, and can you talk about what that entails?
What inspired it?
Before you, was there a curator of comics and cartooning? Right.
No. So I was the librarian for ancient and medieval history because I did my graduate work at Columbia in medieval religious history. And I was very happy. I went to library school specifically so that I could get this job, and I got that job, and I was delighted. I had been in school for 12 solid years at that point. I was a college dropout who became a bartender. And then I went back to school in my 30s to get my bachelor's. And then I got a full fellowship to Columbia. And I was there for 6 years. And then I started working a non-professional job in the library and realized that I could get the job that I wanted, I thought I wanted, if I went to library school. So it was BA, MA, MPhil, MLS in 12 years. And I did no reading for pleasure in that time. Zilch, nothing. The only way I relaxed was by watching Buffy the Vampire Slayer when I couldn't stand reading French religious history. It's very relaxing. So once I was once I had the job of librarian for ancient and medieval history, I thought, oh, well, now I have some free time. I wonder what's happening in comics. I have to point out, I had been an opportunistic comics reader up to that point. I would read the comics in my pediatrician's office. I would read the Archies in my orthodontist's office. I would read the Edward Goreys that my sister bought at Gotham Book Mart. I would read National Lampoons that were getting, circulated, underground comics that were getting circulated. I was in high school in the mid-'70s, early to mid-'70s. And National Lampoon led me to heavy metal, which was the real, well, actually two.
Sure.
The Smithsonian collection of newspaper comics that I bought in '78.
Oh yeah, great book.
And then heavy metal. I had never thought comics could be that beautiful.
Yeah.
And the stories that odd.
Let me tell you a quick story about that first issue.
Tell us a story.
There was a party every month at Jeanette Kahn's apartment. Back in those days, it was on Central Park West.
Fridays at Jeanette's, they are legendary.
Yes, and the industry was all in New York in those days, so we all went, and we all had a great time for one night every month. And I'm sitting on the couch talking with Neil Adams, who I'd known for years, and Heavy Metal 1 just came out, and we started talking about it. And Neil and I, maybe for the first time ever, maybe for the only time ever, completely agreed that first issue wasn't very good, but its existence was spectacular and a game changer. And it's morphed through different publishers, different publishing companies. I guess it's doing that again. I mean, I'm not knocking them because there's no such thing as magazines anymore. But damn, it was the right thing at the right time. First of all, it took Warren to the next level. Second, it acknowledged that Earth has more than the United States in it. And that's why I started First Comics. I wanted to do more than just what was typical DC and Marvel fare. For me, and this is 77, something like that.
78.
It was very influential, and I'm sure it was equally influential to many of the other new young publishers. I have a background in underground comics from the early 70s, which is why I think people like you, Karen, are going to destroy the comics medium by giving us too much respectability.
God damn me.
Yeah, really. I'll watch it.
It's interesting about heavy metal and Neil and that. I don't know. So I don't know if it was exactly that or if it was after issue 1, but I know that Neil was responsible for suggesting John Workman to become art director at Heavy Metal.
I recall that.
And he was the one who suggested to Heavy Metal that they hire John for that role, which was a smart role hire.
Brilliant hire. I mean, everything I've ever seen John do in all these thousands of years has been spectacular, and he's also just one of the smartest, nicest human beings in the solar system.
Yeah,
to the best of my experience. And he was the right guy for the job. He was the exact right guy. He had been working in DC's production department, which is not a bad job, and a lot of really good people came out of there. Walt Simonson almost came out of there, but he turned down the job. Anyway, that I don't think that was luck.
Yeah, no, I don't.
He knew what he was talking about, and the powers that be either understood it or they just didn't want to have to be badgered by Neil anymore. It could be both.
So back to Heavy Metal blew mine as well. And
yeah, it also introduced me to American cartoonists that I was not familiar with. Charles Burns and Drew Friedman and Richard Corbin. They all showed up in the pages of that magazine. So I was getting inundated with this amazing 1980s European stuff. I was a particular fan of Ranxerox, Librarian Tamburini, and Enki Bilal he had a continuing series called The Hunting Party, which was just mesmerizing. So I began to understand that there was an American comic scene that I had not been exposed to. Because you may notice, and I say this with some embarrassment, you may notice that in my recitation of what I grew up on, superheroes did not figure.
Sure. I noticed.
I, loved the Batman show. I came home after school and watched I always mix up George Reeves and Steve Reeves. The George Reeves Superman.
Yeah.
And I was huge fans of both. And when I discovered the Fleischer Brothers Superman cartoons, fans of those as well.
Yeah.
But, to jump into superheroes when you've not been following them forever, you just can't tell the players without a scorecard. And I didn't even know about comic shops or comics conventions. Like I said, it was opportunistic until I got a job as librarian for ancient and medieval history, and I decided to investigate what had been going on in comics during my 12-year absence.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in 2002, a lot had been going on, and I discovered Fantagraphics and Dark Horse, and the first graphic novel I bought was from Dark Horse. It was Paul Hornschemeyer's Mother Come Home, and it just blew my mind. It was like reading heavy metal again. It was deep and it was lovely, and I just more, and I was sending off, because it was not pre-internet but pre-internet. I was sending off my little mail order forms to Fantagraphics and getting books in the mail. And then I came up against a problem with which many of your listeners may be familiar, which is my salary and my expenses weren't quite, it wasn't that Mr. Macabre, 19 shillings income, 20 shillings expenses, misery. So I decided that I should be able to read them in my library.
You should.
I should.
Everyone
thinking,
should.
well, I guess I'm going to have to check them out of the library. Oh, I work in a library. How can I suggest we do this in a way that is not simply, you don't pay me enough to
read all the comics that I want to read.
Passion. Yeah. So I came up with a three-pronged argument. One, comics were getting increasing critical and academic recognition. Dissertations were being written, articles in peer-reviewed journals were getting published. The New Yorker, the New York Review of Books were reviewing graphic novels, and I came in with many examples of those. My second argument was, we have a film school and we have a film studies program. And even in 2005, which was when I actually made the proposal, because it took me 3 years to run out of money. Even in 2005, there was quite a correlation between Hollywood and the comics, and now obviously even more so.
Sure.
Although, parenthetically, I will say I'm a little sorry that the runaway success of the Marvel Cinematic Universe has reinforced in many people's minds that comics equals superheroes.
Sure.
I
agree with
we
you.
had Ghost World.
It's
And we had
success their massive success in virtually all media.
Yes. Kings of all media.
and what's spooky about that is it was so much fun when there was like 8 of us sitting around just reading this stuff and being just thoroughly entertained, and we're thinking, wow, what if they made a movie that was worthwhile? Our idea of a worthwhile movie were the 1930s Flash Gordon serials, which, by the way, were fantastic. But not like, Deadpool. It did give us that respectability, and I have been a little annoyed by that. I have been. It's like, no, we're not doing this for posterity. We're doing this because they're comic books. Get it?
Right.
Yeah.
So
my third argument was a more sentimental one. Do you know what Columbia University's full name is?
no.
Columbia University in the city of New York. That's what's on all my business cards.
Really?
It's on all the
That is
right,
excellent.
Columbia University in the city of New York. So I made the argument that comics in America began in New York and were very much a New York institution. And Columbia has been a New York institution since 1754. So why not?
Which
And
is
it was
long.
King's College, wasn't it?
Right, it was King's College.
And you went to
exactly.
Queen's College too.
I gave a talk at Queen's College.
No, I meant you went to Rutgers.
Oh, that's
Rutgers
right.
was Queen's College.
That's right. That's right. That's where I did my MLS. Yeah, that's true. And I would also say about King's College that we have in the university archives, the history of the university itself, a comic strip, essentially, a salacious, vicious comic strip done by students about a professor whom they hated in 1766.
Oh my!
When it was still King's College.
You showed me that.
I did show you.
Columbia. And I got the feeling that if you walk into the room, you got shown that. I mean, everybody who that was it. And
that's a big bring it out for visitors piece. Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's mind blowing. I mean, it's just totally mind blowing. It's like, what, they did this? Wait a moment. Did they get this from a cable
Balloons, candles, beach balloons, and some ignorance. Some in one panel they've got the first person speaking is the person on the right in the panel, but whatever. So comics have a long history at Columbia as well. So I made these three arguments, and I also brought in a stack of books from my own collection. And I'm trying to remember, I feel like it was a graduate student whom I'd met before I started the collection who told me to read Daredevil, Love and War. And Bill Sienkiewicz's art became kind of one of my examples, number one, as to why comics don't look like what you think they look like.
Right.
I held up The Death of Gwen Stacy and Daredevil, Love and War and said, see, there's this, which probably you're thinking of is what comics look like, but then there's this, which is also what comics look like. And goddamn if they didn't give me some money. It wasn't a lot of money. I
thank them for it today.
It wasn't a lot of money. It was $4,000, which didn't go far even in 2005. And I immediately overspent it by $1,000, which is something you could do back in 2005. We haven't been able to do it since 2008. And back then, as much as you spent in a fiscal year, you got that plus 8% the next year. So it started growing and growing, and they found other money to add to it. The funds were from an endowed fund for American Studies, so I was kind of limited to American comics for a long time. But I kept on hacking away at my colleague, the librarian for post-medieval Western Europe. Hey, buy me some Tintin. Hey, buy me some Asterix. Hey, buy me this, buy me this. And finally, he just knocked off a few $1,000s from his funds and gave it to me for European comics. And now I've got a lot more money. And in about a year, I'm going to have even more because while the details can't yet be announced, we have just received an enormous gift of money to endow a named fund, which will be for the acquisition, stewardship, and processing of comics and cartoons.
I am like I have goosebumps over this.
I
Like, this is
know,
so
right?
wonderful.
Oh yeah.
I'm like, I can't wait to find this out what this is. As soon as I need to know immediately. As soon as it happens.
Okay.
I I love doing this show. This is our 50th episode. Thank everybody for watching. But I love comics in ways I cannot express. One of the letters and papers in your collection is Wendy and Richard Pini, and when I was a young boy, ElfQuest was the first like non-superhero comic book that I read, and it was because Marvel put it in Epic, and it was on the racks. Also, and I've said this on the show before, but it's also the first comic that I evangelized, that I got other people who were not comic book people to read. It was we had a boarder who was a grown woman living in our house with us, and I'm like, I think you would like this. This is and it worked, and it is the thing also about ElfQuest that was very important to me was that I looked at this and I looked at the credits page and I said, this was drawn and written by a woman. That's awesome. That's incredible. And so tell me about having that there and what's in that collection.
First, I'll tell you a funny story about how it got there.
By the way, Mindy's cavelling, so.
I know, Mindy. I'm loving your chat lines.
I'm just loving that Mindy's watching. So.
So in 2012, I had one collection, Chris Claremont, which arrived the year earlier. I went out to San Diego in 2012, and Judy Hansen had actually said, you should talk to Wendy and Richard Pini. I didn't know them. I didn't know ElfQuest. I walked up to them at their table in Artist Alley, and I introduced myself, and I gave them my card, and I said, so, we are creating an archive for comics, and I wonder if you'd be interested in having us preserve your legacy. And Wendy's just drawing, she's working on stuff. And Richard's standing there, and he goes, wow, you have just saved our lives. He said, I've been wondering what we were going to do with everything, and I kept envisioning things being on card tables at a garage sale after we died. And I'm like, well, that doesn't have to be the case. So over the next, they're still getting stuff to us. Richard wants to scan everything before it gets to us, but we've got pretty much all of the ElfQuest art at this point. Wendy has never sold any of the art from the comic books. We have Mask of the Red Death materials. We have correspondence, we have contracts, we have fan mail, we have fanzines, both about ElfQuest and fanzines in which Wendy appeared before she created ElfQuest. We have the Red Sonja costume. And it has been stored in a series of specially designed boxes by our conservation department. It's really quite spectacular. Each one having a photo of its contents on it, so exactly.
That is fantastic and appropriate and wonderful.
Right? Yeah. And we have her plans for the costume. Her drawing things out, her list of what she needed. It's
incredible that she had it. That she had it. Right?
Well, yeah, they keep things.
Well, there's that.
It is a complete picture of a comics career. We have little booklets that she drew when she was like 9 or 10, about Blackie the horse, and we have the actual Blackie the horse, which I hope he's not watching, but it's horrifying. It's truly the most horrifying thing you'll ever see. So yeah, so we have an absolute encapsulation of what, 50 years,
Wow.
of 50 plus years, because it predates ElfQuest as well. And yeah, so we had Chris Claremont at that point, and that came about because I got an email from Beth Fleischer, his wife, one day saying, "Hi, my husband is Chris Claremont, and he's interested in putting his papers in a university. Is Columbia interested?"
Yes.
Like, well, I'm interested, but I don't work in Rare Books. Let me get back to you. Went up to Rare Books and talked to the director there, and he said, yeah, he asked a lot of questions, but then he said, yeah. And I said, well, we might want to think about putting some other people in there because other people might want to join him. And he said, well, of course, you don't want a collecting area with one collection in it.
Right.
So, so I was kind of an adjunct curator from that point. And it got a little hectic for the next several years because I was still the librarian for ancient and medieval history. I was building the circulating graphic novels collection, and I was going out in search of archives for rare books. And that got stressful. And then in 2016, they moved me from the division that I had been in to the Rare Book and Manuscript Library. And they told me, I said, what's my title going to be? They said, what do you want it to be? I said, curator for comics and cartoons, because we have this amazing editorial cartoon art collection, both from the Pulitzer Prizes and from a collection that we got later on of about 2,000 pieces going back to Thomas Nast and coming up to the early 21st century.
That's fantastic.
I know. I love editorial cartoons. They're such time capsules, and they're such reminders of how we never learn anything.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I learned how to read from newspapers, from the comics in newspapers. My sister was involved in making sure I did that. And therefore it was very easy for me to transition over to the editorial cartoons. John Fischetti, who was drawing for the Chicago Daily News in those days, he was also a Superboy artist. He would pencil, sometimes more inking, I think. And so at some point I learned that, and I learned the connection between the different types of art forms in popular publishing. And that was quite a revelation. Because that took me all the way back to like Winsor McKay's editorial cartoons, which are very different in feeling, not in style, but in feeling from, Little Nemo and Rarebit Feud and all of that. And of course, there's the whole Hearst thing, which is always kind of cool in a very upsetting way. And it opened up the whole world to me. I really miss editorial cartoons. There's about 6 left, but that's okay because there's only like 8 newspapers. But that was a major thing for me. Major.
Yeah.
Just make sure you see everything that Pia Guerra is doing.
Right. Oh yeah, great cartoons from Pia Guerra.
I was we were at the Capitol this year, and there is a copy of Panic from 1954 in the museum there, talking about and there's also an editorial cartoon from Herb. I sent these to Mike when I was there. Is Herb Block?
Her block.
Making fun of it's Margaret Chase Smith telling McCarthyism to go wash your hands.
Yeah.
We've got a beautiful book from 1935. And there's a giant kind of spectral Abraham Lincoln looking down at a tiny guy standing at a mic, and he's labeled demagogue, and he's like Father Coughlin or something.
Sure.
And he's just comparing what oratory was and what oratory has become.
That's great. That's fantastic.
Really powerful.
Absolutely.
I had the privilege of being able to hang out on more than one occasion with Bill Malden, who was the editorial cartoonist. Bill Malden.
Bill Malden. Oh my God.
Yeah, yeah.
He'll do that to you. Just prepare. Every once in a while he'll just throw this, and you'd be like, you're just beside yourself.
Yeah, I mean the time that Martha Washington and forget that.
Yeah, that.
But Bill was fascinated by the underground comics movement. We started talking. I don't know where we were, but this was like the very late '60s. He was also fascinated by the whole underground newspaper movement. I was with the Seed in those days, and he was with the Chicago Sun-Times. So we're like journalism brothers. And my God, what a fascinating career. He even had a little career as an actor, but he didn't like it. He was in his own movie. He did a movie of his Willie and Joe stuff during World War II, and he was in it. And then
there was an amazing kind of overview of his entire career at the Pritzker Military Museum in Chicago. Like 2021, maybe 2022. That I went out to see because it was when the big Chris Ware exhibition was at the Cultural Center, and the big Dan Nadell exhibition was at one of the other museums. It was a really good summer for comics in Chicago.
Oh yeah. Well, I'd like to think we've had a few good summers there, but First Comics did. Let me say that, and then that was very very nice. But with guys like John Fischetti and Bill Malden in my backyard, or at least working out of the newspaper building, and Wayne Stayskull and a few other editorial cartoonists at that time, I developed a worship of that work that has put me on a friendship basis with people of all political spectrums. Now, I'm known for being a little on the left side, a little bit, kind of Marxist to the right of me, but not consistently. There are some right-wing things that make a little sense to me. But as a kid, I had to figure out, why does this Nazi love this work that I love? So I learned perspective, not cartoonist perspective.
Intellectual perspective. I get it.
I get that.
Yeah, that was wonderful. It's a wonderful part of my comics education, if you will.
Yeah, I've been on the Pulitzer jury 4 times now.
Really? And what is that like? What can you tell us about that?
It's interesting. So the first time I was on, I was the only person who knew anything about comics. And I had a lot of explaining to do.
Now, was this the jury for specifically cartoons?
Yeah. I was on the editorial cartoon jury. The second time, they brought in Dan Perkins, Tom Tomorrow. So he and I together had a lot of explaining to do. We were talking about Tom the Dancing Bug, and it was the year of Donald and John, right? The Calvin and Hobbes tribute to Donald Trump and his mythical PR man, John Miller. And hilarious, I think Reuben Bowling's an absolute genius. So Dan and I were both pushing very hard for Reuben Bowling, and the editorial folk we were talking to, the newspaper folk we were talking to, were like, well, isn't this just plagiarism? No, it's a hermeneutic, basically. He is using your knowledge of Calvin and Hobbes as a shortcut so that you understand exactly what the relationship between Donald and John is. I don't know. It took a while. We finally
that's interesting.
We finally got him into the top 3, which you send off to the board for them to make their decision. But it was a challenge, and both Dan and I mentioned, you should have some more cartoonists on this panel. So the third time, was during COVID, and we did it all via Zoom. 8 hours on a Zoom,
Oh,
then 5 hours on a Zoom the next day. Oh my God! I thought my iPad was gonna melt down. And that we had two cartoonists, Signet Wilkinson, and God, I'm blanking on the guy. That was a bad year because we chose 3 what we thought were terrific finalists, and they chose nothing.
She chose nothing.
That was the year without an editorial cartooning award,
Wow.
and it was like a big Trump year.
Yeah.
So it's not like there wasn't a lot.
Sure.
I mean, it was stunning. It was absolutely
at
stunning.
that moment in time, it did not help the editorial cartoonist industry at all.
No, it did not. And then that was the last year that the award was called editorial cartooning. The following year, I was on it again, still on Zoom, and it was illustrated reportage and commentary.
Wow.
And that's the official title, which did not go down well with the editorial cartooning community for good reason. You know, they've got journalism short form and they've got journalism long form as 2 separate categories for prose. You know, there's no reason not to have single panel editorial cartooning and multi-panel editorial cartooning.
Sure.
And continue.
They're 2 different genres or
2 different skill sets.
Skill sets, exactly. You're doing things differently. Absolutely. I mean, they are. I can go on.
I compared it to Jon Stewart versus John Oliver.
That's a great example. That is a great example. They do they do similar things, but they should not be
conflated,
compared in that way. You can do that with Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert. It's a little bit those they work. But yeah, what John Oliver does is something very different.
Yeah,
they're completely different disciplines, and John Oliver worked towards developing his out of the work he did with Jon Stewart and his predecessors, and he took all of that and stepped it up quite a bit. I'm not saying Colbert did not do that. He most certainly did. He made his show his own, and you know what? We have Donald Trump to thank for it, because Colbert, who I'd seen back in the Second City days, so I've been a fan of his for forever. Colbert had a nervous breakdown on his live telecast on election night when it was clear that Trump was going to win, but we didn't believe it, and of course it dragged out forever. And he was just terrible. I mean, his show was very emotional, and he started to play to that after that. The show wasn't quite fixed yet. It only been on for, I don't know, maybe a year or something. And
that's true. He hadn't really hit his stride yet.
No, and he didn't have a producer who really worked out well with him.
Understood what he was doing.
Yeah, and geez, you know, if not for Trump.
Well, I think that's the only thing that I can thank him for, because I am thankful for the fact that Stephen Colbert exists as he does today.
But
yes,
that's about it.
I would posit that if Jon Stewart had not retired when he did,
I agree.
Right before Trump became a candidate, that Trump would never have become president, because he can't stand being laughed at, and Jon Stewart is surgical in his
Absolutely. He is.
He really.
That's one of the most amazing transformations, because I mean, like, he was the MTV news guy. I mean, like, that's, you know, and most people don't understand that, you know. Him and Kurt Loder, you know, they were the news of my generation.
Yeah.
He's one of the smartest.
It's so much fun watching the early Daily shows when he's wearing a suit that looks like it belonged to his father. He grew into those. You know, I wanted to address your AI discussion
Please do.
from before.
It was. I have to say, it was. I can see you in the green room, and you were laughing, and like, I knew that you wanted to say stuff. So please, go ahead.
You know, well, first of all, AI is theft.
Sure.
There's no other way to think about it. And I think one of you mentioned medicine
Yes, I
as a
did.
good application for AI, and that is something that is precise and kind of objective. But to take creativity and try to have a machine do it. You know, I think it was Nick Cave who wrote something. Somebody sent him a Nick Cave song that they had generated on AI. And he's like, you know, this is basically an abomination. It may have my chord structure and it may, you know, address issues that I address, but it is not coming from my soul. It's not coming from my heart. There's nothing of me actually in it. And
Right.
I think that's the case with AI art. It is, I mean, I'm sure that the Seven Fingers and the Alien TypeScript will improve,
Sure.
but it still has that uncanny valley feel to it. But basically, it has that because it is mechanical. It is not human. There's nothing human there. And to see Colin Kaepernick support this and say that this was going to be a way to get more Black voices into comics is heartbreaking. First of all, John Jennings is working on that with his imprint at Abrams. But second of all, if you want to get more Black voices, Black stories into comics, take these people who may have ideas but no artistic skill or comic skill, which are two very different things,
And
and
skill is the operative word, though.
pair them with an actual working artist who could take their idea and turn it into a comic.
Sure.
That is supporting both the industry and the development of more Black voices in the industry. And the
There's
idea that AI can come up with a page turn, you know, with that panel at the bottom right of a 2-page spread that's going to make you want to turn that page, or that AI is going to have the skill of Walt Simonson to guide your eye from one panel to another so beautifully. What the fuck? I'm sorry. It's just it's insane. It's insane, and it's late stage capitalism at its most obscene, and it's heartbreaking to me. You know, I've been such a fan of this man. I've been such a supporter of this man, and he's got some bad advisors, man.
so
And some limited thought too. Some very, very limited thought.
and
What goes hand in hand with the evil of artificial intelligence is the lack of the financial reward.
Mm-hmm.
Every Black artist and most women writers and artists that I hired at DC in the mid 80s, I had to fight tooth and nail to get them a competitive page rate. And I mean, I was an asshole, and I'm proud of it. So work on that. But still, I fought. Not so much for political reasons. I have those too. But because if they're not getting a competitive salary, if they're not getting a fair salary, then they're not going to do the best work that they can. They'll look at other offers, or they'll feel like they're being exploited, and they are. So that's okay. That you should feel that way. You know, AI just removes all of that. It removes the carrot and breaks the stick.
I would say one other thing, which is that a lot of cartoonists start off by copying other cartoonists, you know, that they admire, and then eventually develop a style of their own. I did an interview with Bill Sienkiewicz a few years ago.
That was the first word that came to mind. The first name that came to mind.
I've been going through Dazzler covers, and there's like a Dazzler cover, which is a kind of generic superhero, and like 3 months later, there's a Dazzler cover, which is pure Sienkiewicz.
Right.
And I'm like, what happened in between that time, Bill?
Stop trying to be Neil Adams.
Exactly. And nobody who uses AI is going to stop trying to be somebody else.
Yep.
Because they don't have the training, the skills, or the soul to be who they are.
Absolutely. You're wearing somebody else's clown costume.
The evolution of Bill Sienkiewicz is one of the greatest artistic evolutions in comics, bar none. It is.
Oh my
and you
God.
can see it because I read those early Moon Knights and then I got Elektra, and everything was different. And then and the New Mutants and stuff, like Elektra was, I remember my friends were like, I don't get this, and I'm like, yeah, it's out there, but there's something here. We were kids, so but yeah, that's perfect. I want to come back to what you about Kaepernick, and I've admired him for a long time as well. And one of the things, there's been some discussion over this poor decision, ostensibly out of a good place, poor decision out of a good place, does not diminish anything else he's done. And we need to be, and there has been some blowback that people are like, oh, here's my reason to tell you how he's always been an asshole, or he's always been, there, and we don't want that. That's not, this is a poor decision. It's
everybody in the public eye gets that, no matter how big or small you are,
right.
Gets that when they do something that somebody else doesn't like. That's the problem with being in the public eye. And it's a problem you
when
feel
people say about celebrities or sports stars. They should just stick to dribbling basketballs. They should just stick to acting and not talk about politics. It's like, you mean like you talk about politics?
Right.
Utter stranger who works in a diner. I mean, I don't know. I just, everybody should be allowed to say what they think.
Yes, I 100% agree.
But he had an amazing thing to say. And it was powerful, and it was significant, and it honored the people that he was trying to honor.
And it cost him his career.
And
That's true.
And that drove him into the arms of AI.
I like that a lot. You can't just take a celebrity and say, well, that's all you can do because you've decided to be a celebrity. That just doesn't make any sense. And let us remember that like 2 of the last 3 or 4 Republican Party presidents were TV stars. Yeah. Ronald Reagan and what's this guy, Trump. And
he's just a con
man. Yeah. Okay, well, why is this guy's opinion bad and that guy's opinion good? I worked with Rob Reiner on child services issues, on child welfare issues. Quite a few, actually. Him and his people. He has a whole staff devoted to this.
I bet he does.
And he means it. I mean, it's not just like, okay, I'm going to do this so that people will know I'm not an asshole. No. He puts everything where his mouth is. And he couldn't do any of that if not for his celebrity. And we're all better off because of it.
And or these people don't choose to be celebrities. That's true. Nobody chooses to be a celebrity. It's the people who are bad-mouthing them who've turned them into celebrities.
Exactly. Yes. And if all of a sudden you think somebody sucks that you used to love because you don't like who he's supporting, well, I'm just glad I was never a Kid Rock fan.
Yeah. Ooh, yeah. Ted Nugent.
There you go. I want to come back to something I kind of mentioned earlier. When Mike has been mentioning you being on the show pretty much since we started. He's like, Karen Green should be on the show, and I agreed. We just didn't have the right time. But the first time I reached out to you was when Trina Robbins passed away, and I wanted it didn't work out for you scheduling wise. But I'm glad we were able to make this happen. But you can we do that now? And also, can we bring it into what She Makes Comics means to you and how important first of all, I own it and I watch it probably a couple times a year.
Aw.
Because it is so absolutely critical to understanding what this industry means to people. But can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I was contacted by Marissa Stoddard, the director, and this was going to be her first like full length film.
Yeah.
She was directing, and she wanted just my advice on women that they should interview. And so we had like a Google spreadsheet, and I started, putting names in, and then they were color coded as to whether she'd reached out to them and they'd said no, or she'd reached out to them and they'd said yes, or they'd never responded, whatever. And so I just thought I was going to be like a consultant, thanks to Karen Green. And then they interviewed me at Comic-Con, and then I guess it was Karen Berger and Jeanette Kahn and Paul Levitz that they interviewed in the Rare Book and Manuscript Library, because they didn't have a place in New York, because Marissa and her crew are based in California. So I was, negotiating that and helping out there. And and I was also, they interviewed me for the Kickstarter campaign.
Sure.
So I was involved in ways that I thought were not like a big deal. And then I got my screener, and it said, co-producer Karen Green, and I wrote to Marissa. I'm like, what? What is this about? I was just a consultant. She's like, no, you really helped make this happen. So I helped make that happen. And it's exciting to be able to talk about women in comics, because a lot of people seem to think that women in comics is like this new thing,
Right.
without, Lily Renee or Jill Elgin or Nell Brinkley. And, it was Trina who brought people like Nell Brinkley back into public consciousness.
I have her Nell Brinkley book.
Oh yeah.
Beautiful.
Fabulous. Absolutely fabulous.
Fantastic. But
I have every book that Trina did.
I would say that Trina's passing was like the Trinity that joined Diane Newman and Aileen Kaminsky-Crumb, a year or so earlier. Those were three foundational women in women's underground comics who went on to do profound things.
Right.
When I first met Aileen, I went up to her and I said, I just wanted to tell you that your book, Love That Bunch, is so meaningful to me. And she said, thank you. And she gave me this look, which in a later interview with her, I interpreted as, oh my God, darling, I'm so sorry. You must be so damaged. But it's meaningful. And for it to be those three, Trina, who kind of established the women's underground comics movement, and then Aileen and Diane, who became the splinter cell creating Twisted Sisters when there were ideological clashes between them. It's astonishing that those three left us
So quickly.
in such a short span.
That is, but let us remember that Trina was Moore's interested trailblazer in underground comics. She was by far. She was a trailblazer in the acknowledgement and study and history of the role women have always played in the cartoonist world. Always. She turned me on to, when I was young. She was older than me. She turned me on to people I'd never heard of, and rapidly started to worship.
Absolutely. It was Trina who, after Lily Renee passed at the age of 102, I think, her son contacted me and said, hey, my mom was a cartoonist, and I understand you have a comics collection. Would you like some of her stuff? You have my father's papers there already, which we did. We have Lily Renee's husband's papers because he was like a big lawyer / philanthropist, and he's part of our whole kind of like political New York collecting area. So I went over and I looked at a bunch of stuff, and they wanted to give some things to the Jewish Museum in Vienna because they had done a big retrospective. But I got several things, and one of them was a single panel with what looked like a kind of blonde Tarzan swinging through with a woman. And I posted it on my Facebook page, and Trina commented, "Oh, yes, that was her audition panel for Fiction House." Okay.
All right.
That immediately got more interesting.
And that's how that works.
And that's Trina. I wish I had.
Why I will never leave Facebook.
I wish I had tape recorded the conversations, phone conversations we had like in the 70s and 80s. I mean, that would have been her next book, I think. And it was just amazing. My admiration for Trina knows no bounds.
She was such a force of nature. You know, she was just such a firecracker. Never slowed down, never gave up, never
didn't want to slow down.
Go for an answer. Didn't want to slow down, yeah. And she was so forceful. And I didn't always agree with what she said, but goddamn, she always had a strong argument.
Yeah, I understand that.
She and I were both wobblies for a while when we were young. Now, not in the same area. I was in Chicago. She was on the coast. But when she did all these illustrations and put together all this artwork for this book of old wobbly stories.
Oh, right. Yeah, I know that.
Yeah. I didn't know of its existence. I actually found it in a comic book shop that had a little room for the politics stuff. That was across the street from Northwestern University, which I thought was hilarious. And, the Pritzker Pavilion. So that's even more bizarre. I mean, it's wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful. And I bought this, and the guy who owns, I think still owns the store, would look at me. He says, "You know about this?" And I thought, like, do I want to tell him all about the wobblies and stuff? So I did it very briefly. And then I gave him my credit card, and he says, "You did this stuff, you had these attitudes at DC Comics?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I did."
Meet Denny O'Neil. Come on.
I shared an office with Denny for 3 years. What a wonderful experience. That's where we did the question. It was wonderful. Oh,
he was wonderful. He was really something, till the day he died. He walked around with that little peace symbol pin on his lapel. It was just, he was something. I really admired him.
The funny thing about Denny was, and you'll enjoy this, I hope our viewers will as well. Every morning he would sit down and open up the newspaper and read the newspaper. A lot of people do that at work if you have a desk job and you don't work for an asshole. And Denny would do that. But every day it was the New York Post, Rupert Murdoch's New York Post.
Interesting.
And after a short period of time, I said, "Why the Post?" And he says, "Yeah, I understand that. I've been reading it all my life." Well, it used to be a liberal newspaper back in the 50s.
Right. Yeah. It's had quite a journey.
Yeah, right. So that was one of the great anomalies in my life. It's like this guy who didn't consider himself anything more than just your run-of-the-mill liberal. Well, I guess that may be true until you look at his influence on people.
Right.
Started off the day with Rupert Murdoch. Wow. I guess that maybe I just wake up angry. I don't know.
It might be habit. It might be, know your enemy.
Yeah. Could be both.
Yep. I think there's a lot of both of those things in it, to be honest.
Big believer in causation.
What's the most in your collection that you've done, and it's Karen's collection, what is the most interesting or surprising thing that you've acquired?
Oh, this is easy. It was December 2020, and I had been tagged in an Instagram comment by somebody that I'd only met once, but had a kind of online relationship with. She just put my handle in the comment, nothing else. So I scroll up to see what the item is, and it's an account from a guy who's a sculptor and the assistant to a well-known sculptor who likes to buy weird Americana at auction and then resell it. And his Instagram account was kind of the catalog. And if it was for sale, he would give the price. And if it wasn't for sale, he'd say not for sale. So the thing that she had tagged me on was a scrapbook that was 35 pounds and roughly a foot high, that had been compiled by a Kansas barber named I.A. Persinger, beginning in 1928. He collected wash tubs strips and glued them in for his customers to read while they were waiting to get their hair cut.
Oh, that's beautiful.
He kept going from 1928 till maybe 33, 34. And so it becomes, he starts writing things in and he starts drawing things in, and his customers start writing things and drawing things. And it becomes a chronicle of the Depression. It becomes a chronicle of social networks before we had social networks. The kind of anthropological sense of a social network. There's one whole page of little couplets like the kind that you'd write in somebody's high school autograph book. That were all from people who lived in Moline, Kansas. And Persinger was in Fredonia, Kansas, which I love because, of course, Fredonia is duck soup.
Hail Fredonia.
Hail Fredonia. Fredonia, Kansas, which was 40 miles away. And in 1928, it took a while to go 40 miles someplace. So he must have been quite the barber. So I contact the guy. I say, I know it's not yet for sale, because that's what he said, not yet for sale. I know it's not yet for sale, but if there's any way you could keep Columbia in mind when you do decide to sell it, I would love to see if we can buy this from you. And he wrote back very quickly and said, oh, I would love for it to be a Columbia. Do you want to come out and see it? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it was January, I guess it was early January of 2021, no vaccines. I had been doing no public transportation. And I walked from Morningside Heights in Manhattan to Ridgewood in Queens.
Was that where you was?
3-hour walk.
Well, yeah, you couldn't cut across the river.
Well, you can. Yeah,
bridges.
There's bridges.
Gotta walk to the river.
Have you heard the
I've seen them.
You walk to Queens.
Got a train running down the middle of it. I like that.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's true. But anyway, I walk a lot. Anybody who follows me on Facebook knows I walk a lot. I take a lot of photographs along the way. Although walking through Maspeth was not fun. It was deserted swampland on one side of the street and huge empty warehouses on the other side of the street. Nobody as far as the eye could see. That's not something I enjoy walking through. But I did it, and I looked at this thing, and it blew my mind, and I asked him what he was selling it for, and he gave me a number, and that number just happened to be exactly what I had left in my funds for that fiscal year, because the library had been closed down like a drum from March 2020 through August 2020, and so we'd not been allowed to buy anything. And we really needed to spend out our funds.
Oh,
Because
sure.
if you don't spend out your funds,
You lose them.
You get what you spend, and
Yeah.
that's bad. Yeah, you spend them or lose them. So I was very excited about this, and I came back and I sent an email to my director, to our head of archives processing, and to our head of conservation, saying, "Look at this! How cool is this?" But I think it's going to need some sort of special cradle for using in the reading room, because you couldn't turn the pages without.
Sure. And they were pasted in, right?
Right. And there was like a dowel going down through two poles of one side of the paper. So it wasn't very flexible. So our head of conservation writes back and goes, "Wow, that's cool," and says, "I can see it's going to need some conservation work, and I think I'm going to have to see it to be sure, but it might need to be disbound and digitized and then reassembled. And we're going to have to build a special box for it, and it's probably going to run about $5,000. And I thought that was not going to be a problem. But it turns out we have like a very small budget for conservation every year, and it always goes towards our exhibitions, because they do all the prep work and all the mount building, etc., for our exhibitions. So my director said, "I'm reluctant to add yet another item to our collections that will be unused and unusable for years to come." And I'm like, but, I got really whiny. And I said, "It's just going to get bought by a private collector, and it's going to deteriorate even more." And he's like, "That can't be our problem." So I went on Facebook and I wrote a really whiny, cranky post, not identifying it, just saying I had a chance to buy something so rare and so unique, and I had the money for it, but I didn't have the money for the conservation, and because of $5,000, I'm not going to be able to buy this thing. And people are in the comments. They're like, "Start a GoFundMe. I'll kick in $100." I'm like, that's not going to work. And then Maggie Thompson, who is, as a saint,
Sure.
writes, "Check your email." And I go to my email, and she says, "I just sold 3 pieces at auction that went for a lot more than I thought they were going to go for. What is this thing?" So I sent her the post, and she sent us a check for $5,000.
There you
And,
go. God bless her.
I bought.
That is-
Oh God, I love that
That's
woman.
amazing.
And so I bought the thing. It was digitized. Oh, and here we go. So wash tubs still in copyright.
Mm.
It was the copyright was with the NEA Syndicate, which went out of business and was bought by Andrews McMeel. So I'm like, okay, so we can digitize it so people can consult it in the library, but we're not going to be able to put this up on the internet. And that did not please me. So I know the former editor-in-chief at King Features, Brandon Burford, and I wrote to him and said, "Hey, do you know people in permissions at Andrews McMeel?" And I explained why. And he wrote back, he's like, "I'm going to put you in touch with their editor-in-chief, because that's really who you want to make the decision." So he connected us, and I sent an email saying, there hasn't been a wash tubs collection since the 80s, and it's out of print, so I'm not going to cost anybody any money. This has transformative scholarly value. And they gave us permission. So now you can go onto the Internet Archive and look for the Persinger scrapbook and look through all 1,540 pages of it.
That's
So
I have.
that-
I'm sorry. I have an obligation to fulfill. I have all these. Whoa, beauty, beauty. I have all of these dead J school professors that I don't want to piss off. So I have to point out that Wash Tubs was the seminal heroic fantasy daily newspaper strip. It changed the medium. It expanded the medium greatly, and it was produced by a young cartoonist named Roy Crane, who I grew up with reading Buzz Sawyer. This was his strip for a couple of decades before that. And it was, Buzz Sawyer was brilliant. His use of craft tints, of the duo shade boards, spectacular, probably the best of anybody ever in history, or at least Earth history. So your acquisition is much more important than you just made out.
But that's the case with all of our acquisitions.
That's right.
It's going to hit somewhere, somebody, and answer a research problem or answer an academic question. And that's what's so exciting about working in a rare book and manuscript library. People come in and it's like, oh, they're looking at the papers of Edward Said. Oh, they're looking at the papers of Tony Kushner. Oh, they're looking at the papers of Wellington Koo. Oh, they're looking at the papers of this obscure anti-fascist society, which happens to have some comics in there, because I'm finding comics everywhere.
I don't stop though. The Little King, he drew for virtually every socialist magazine in the 1930s, including the one that was started by Rex Stout.
Yeah. I have a small collection compared to Glenn Bray's. I mean, it's a large collection compared to the average person, but over 24 pieces of Art Young cartoon art, who was like the king of anti-capitalism.
Yeah.
You know, he was the cartoonist for Max Eastman at the Masses before, veering off and doing his own magazine, Good Morning. And we've got this fantastic cartoon by him of Hearst with these crazy eyes, and with one leg stretched out and the heel resting on the head of Arthur Wisbane or Arthur Brisbane. And it's glorious. What more could you ask for?
Holy crap. I'd remember that. I don't think I've seen that one.
I will post it for you on Facebook.
I have one more question on the wash tubs piece. How did this person get it?
Bought it at auction.
He bought it at auction. Someone put it on auctions from this barber from the Midwest.
I think it was the grandson of Persinger, because on the inside back cover, he has this whole complicated thing about this book belongs to I.A. Persinger and should go to the son of, and he mentions his daughter's name, and then he mentions his grandson's name, and I'm assuming his grandson, I don't know, his daughter was grown in the 30s, so, kid maybe was born in the 30s.
Thank
so
goodness
maybe he sold
knew
it.
Enough
maybe
to put
he
it at
died,
auction.
and his kids said, "What are we going to do with this thing? Let's put it on auction and see what we
Thank
can
goodness. Thank goodness they had the thought to. Imagine if it just ended up in the garbage somewhere.
Can you imagine what had?
Horrifying.
Well, I know you don't want to imagine.
We all know what happened.
Yeah, I once went to a picture framing place in Westchester, and it was original comic strip art, and the guy there said, "Oh yeah, I used to work at King Features." So I went, "Oh, that's cool."
I hate this story. I hate this story. I know this story. I hate this story.
I'm so sorry, Bob. I'm so sorry.
Now I got to hear it.
It's going to fry your brain.
You're not going to like it.
He was just wonderful about his job at King Features. He just loved tearing up artwork, original artwork, because it was cheaper to tear up Alex Raymond and Hal Foster than it was to return it.
Told you you'd hate it.
Yep.
Yeah, I hate it.
Yeah. Oh my God. And I was polite because he had my artwork and I didn't want him to tear it up. But as I was walking back to the car, I was going like, holy shit, I hope I did the right thing.
Yeah. Man. Well, it's like that story of Neil Adams showing up at DC and seeing the intern being sent off to shred the day's original art, and him saying,
Yeah.
"You're not going to be doing that any longer." It's just the cavalier nature. Robert McKay, Windsor McKay's son. I think this is a fairly well-known story that Woody Gelman, I think, went to his studio and saw that he was using his father's artwork as like a cutting base, like a board or a cutting board. And I mean, there's got to be some Oedipal stuff happening there as well, but I mean, Robert never quite matched his father's genius.
There's
Or
I think that there is the people who are comic book fans are the average comic book fan is not exposed or never seen original pages and don't know how majestic they are, even beyond what you get in the in your pamphlet. When you've seen it once, it's all you need to do to up close to know it cannot be AI, right? It it's so special. I don't have a lot. I I have a few pages. I have a page. I have two pages that I recently acquired. One is a returned page from DC, and so it's lettered. I mean, it's penciled, inked, and then lettered. It's Workman, so the letters are on the page. And I have another page by the same artist, and it's just pencils. And it's ridiculously breathtaking. And see, for you to have the collection that you have, and I mean, can we talk about what I happen to know is coming? Are you allowed to talk about that? Because somebody did a little bearded birdie said you were going to be getting some other stuff.
Are you talking about like Rick Veitch?
Nope. More bearded, taller.
Oh, you mentioned earlier Simonson's. So this is funny. The first director of Rare Books that I worked with, the one who gave Claremont the green light, I went with him on a visit to Walton Weezy's house because I wanted to talk to them about their stuff.
Sure.
And they were lovely because, of course, they are like the nicest human beings in comics. Truth. Yeah. I mean, I always hear that about Archie Goodwin, and I think they've like assumed his mantle.
But Archie had a sarcastic streak that could level a block.
Oh yeah, see, I never met him. Sorry.
Walter, don't listen. I love Walter and Louise, and I love them so much, but they are human. They are wonderful humans, but don't push them off. They'll let you know.
Okay, fair enough.
Let you know.
Yeah.
They'll let you know.
I've seen Walter kind of feisty.
I'm excited. I get to see them both next weekend, so I'm looking forward to that. So
we went out to visit, and this was over a decade ago, and they were astonished at what I was interested in, because they, like many people, think that we're a museum and are just interested in art. But we're a research institution. So we're interested in stuff that tells your story or tells the story of the industry in some way, which is why we're always, do you have invoices? Do you have contracts?
Right.
How much were you getting paid for this thing in that year?
Sure.
Do you have any circulation info? We're always looking for more information. And in their correspondence, you see like what other artists they talked to. So I'm telling him all this stuff, and Weezy's like, you really want these old Brat Pack scripts? Like, yes, we would like your drafts. And I sent him a follow-up, and nothing really happened, and I would run into them, and it never came up. And then one day, maybe about 4 years ago, Wheezy posts a script that she'd stumbled over while cleaning out a drawer, and she said, "So this is going to be going to Columbia," and I'm like, "What?
Wow.
There.
This is the first I've heard of it." And I just said, "I'm very delighted to hear this, Wheezy." And I kind of left it at that because, again, I'm not trying to push them. They work at their own speed. And then they decided to move. They
Right.
just
The move was, I'm sure, a big catalyst.
And we sent them some boxes, and they said, "We've packed 4 boxes of stuff for you during the move, of stuff that we think you'll be interested in." And Walt dropped a kind of hint of some stuff we might get in the future. And but nothing's in writing. Nothing is yet in writing.
Interesting.
So that's why I don't like to talk about. I don't like.
I'm just saying it because he told me about it. Like, he's like, "We're giving our stuff to Karen,"
and he didn't say "do not print."
He's like, "We're giving it. Our stuff's going to Karen Green." Like, that's what he told me.
Well, see, he can say that.
And we were right. I understand that. I understand. This was the weekend before they moved. Like she couldn't come to the show because she was packing. And yeah, he told me very clearly that that's what they were planning. I think that there's some cool stuff like that they come across, like things that older creators and cartoonists come across. Like, he found an old script or plot for the Titans and X-Men, where there's things in it that it didn't, like, there was an epilogue that didn't happen in the book, but like some of those things in the epilogue happened in the last pages of the story. And anyone of my generation will argue that is the greatest single comic existing.
He sent me a message saying, "Karen, would you be interested in all this kind of these scripts and reference materials?"
Yes.
I was for Alien, I guess. Yes. Why, yes, Walt.
Yes, Alien. Yes.
Very interested in that, because that has a lot of information about how an artist works, about what an artist needs to do his or her work, about adaptation.
And the purpose of the collection is to tell the story of this art form from beginning to end in all of its pieces, right? I mean, it's one thing to go to the comic shop or go on to Amazon and get a comic and read it, but there's so much more that goes into it. And again, it's kind of serendipitous that we have you on when we're talking. We started this episode talking about AI and how that's interfering and stuff, because there is so much work and sweat, as Kari said, and blood and just everything that goes into this. You walk into an artist alley in a comic convention and try and find a clean pair of hands.
Yeah.
I'll tell you about a clean pair of hands. I think you've seen this, Bob, but I have a photograph from 38 years ago of me and Wheezy. Walter wasn't in the photo. At John Burns' mansion at a formal party. I was in a tux. Wheezy was in a gown, and we are conversing, and it is arguably the most anti-comic book photo you've ever seen, full of comic book people.
I have a copy of this picture.
And the weirdest part about that story is I had just gotten off the airplane from Alaska, my first trip to Alaska. And I'd spent a week in Alaska, which is a beautiful, stunning place, and then wound up in John's mansion in a tuxedo with a bunch of comics people.
As you do.
Was it his wedding, or is it just having a party?
This is just a party. Every single one of us, including John, was obviously uncomfortable. and we left. We left the party at midnight. Went to a nearby pie place just to have some pie, and John Ratzenberger walks in at like 3 in the morning or 1 in the morning, something like that. And he stares at us at the table, and we're wearing, formal and tuxedos, and he can't believe it. Who dresses up like that to go to a pie place in Fairfield, Connecticut in 1986? And we were pissed that he wasn't wearing his mailman uniform. So it's quid pro quo.
I wanted to say something. Oh, sorry. Keep going.
No, go ahead.
Okay.
What did you want to say?
I wanted to say something. You were talking about what it's like to see original art. And, I can say parenthetically that I did not appreciate superhero artists until I saw original art. It's stunning, just stunning. You can see, and this is what makes the artist editions kind of valuable for the average person, the average fan, because it's the closest thing you can get to seeing what the original art's like.
We're going to try and get Scott on soon.
Right. And that leads me to digital creation.
Sure.
So I can get all this beautiful original art. I can put it in folders with acid-free paper in between each piece, and then in boxes and in map cases, whatever, which are what we call flat files.
Right.
And that's no problem. And anybody can ask to see it, because we're not just for Columbia scholars, we're not just for people writing books, we're for the entire global community of researchers. But if you create digitally,
You got nothing.
what are we supposed to do?
So
we would have a computer with every comics creation program, from Procreate to Manga Studio to whatever, loaded onto it, always in its most current version, migrating the old stuff to updated versions or to new programs when the old ones are no longer supported. I can tell you right now, there isn't any special collections library in this country that's going to do that.
No.
So there's no way to see process. There's
Right.
no way to see the levels. They save all these layers and all these versions, but we won't be able to let people see them.
So I've had conversations with some artists recently about stuff like that, and I've noticed over the past few years a shift away. People are using digital things as tools instead of the be all end all. There are artists who recognize who used it as a tool to, like, I can do this and it's easy for me to do, but they've also come to realize that their art is now ephemeral. And so there's an artist who's working today. He's working at DC, and he pencils digitally, but he inks on boards, and his art has a form. He also recognizes he can then sell those pages, right? Because he can.
Yes.
Perfect example of that. Someone who has really mastered the digital space is Mitch Gerrits. But he is also recognized that when he does, I think there's something he's doing recently that's going to be traditional, but his covers are all traditional, so that he again has something to sell, but also has a tradition, and like I said, he's mastered it. He is brilliant. His pages, the end production of it is gorgeous, and I've been a fan of his since he was coloring Starborn.
There's something about the ephemeral nature,
and then scans it to color.
I'm sorry, what were you saying?
Does his pencils and inks on paper and then scans them so that he can color digitally.
Well, most people, like, that's pretty much like base level.
Yeah,
everything is colored digitally, period. So if someone does
really well digitally, it doesn't look like digital coloring like in the mainstream comics, which seems so flat and plastic to me.
Yeah, but it depends on the printing process too.
Right. The use of glossy paper is, I think, the worst thing that's happened to comics.
I agree with you.
I agree with you.
Also, I would prefer that Marvel used ink that stayed on the paper, glossy paper, instead of coming on my fingers.
Oh, you didn't grow up with
going back to
Carlton,
old
buddy.
times.
But all the back pages are all black, and my fingers are black when I'm done.
But it's that ephemeral nature of comics that you were talking about, Bob, that actually appeals to me. You know, this is on paper, it's going to disappear in one form or another. Enjoy it while you can. And yeah, I mean, digitizing, I love it. It's great. And historical records, it's wonderful. But there's that sort of essence there. It's disposable. Comics were, even in the newspapers, particularly in the newspapers, were perceived as disposable art if they'd even use the word art.
Well, and it's a change in our consumption of media and entertainment, because in this, up until the 80s, if you didn't see it on TV, you never saw it at the TV.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Then we started having VHS copies of things and stuff like that. But up until then, everything it was just you had to be there.
That's right.
And then we started going to Siberia to look inside mines to see what sort of 16 millimeter prints had been hidden there for 80 years. So you never know.
All right, we're almost out of time, but I want to come back to you, Karen, in that if someone wants to see your collection, how does that work? Do you have something that's open to the public, or how does that work?
Okay, so we have finding aids. Somebody gives us a collection. Hopefully they give us a nice, useful box list that we can use to provide things for researchers until it's been processed. Once it's been processed, it's been gathered into series. Like, here's all the correspondence. Here's all the art from this project. Here's all the art from that project. And people can create a research account online, and then go to our finding aids and tick the boxes of what they want to see, and it goes into their research account, and then they make an appointment. It has to be done
like
at
I
least
have some
5
work
days
to do.
And then they show up with a piece of government produced ID, and we take a photograph of them, which goes into their account. And then they're escorted into a room where the stuff that they've asked to see is waiting for them, and they sit at a table and we watch them look at it. You can't take anything in except like a laptop or a camera. You can't take in a book. You can't take in a file folder. You can't take in.
What about a pencil and paper?
Anything that you can take in a pencil. We provide paper that has a hole in the middle of it, because you can't have anything into which you could slide something and carry it.
Oh, that's funny.
It's a very secure.
That's a lot like the FBI. If you ever have to look at some stuff over at the FBI.
Why have you looked at stuff at the FBI?
Why?
Yes.
You're asking me that question?
50 episodes in, I shouldn't be asking.
No, we have 2 minutes left.
I understand. All right. Thank you so much, Karen. We have had a blast. So I am renewed in my love of comics, and I'm thankful for the work that you do.
Karen, on behalf of history, I want to thank you for your service.
Well, I'm honored, sir, and I will attempt to live up to that gratitude.
And I will reach out, and hopefully we'll get together in October.
I'd love that.
I'll come
and
up.
Happy golden anniversary.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for being our 50th episode guest.
So cool.
Absolutely wonderful. Thank you, Karen. Thank you very much.
Thank you both. It's been a real joy.
All right. Okay.
All right, guys. We are.
week.
It is not the week. We have another one on. We have another episode on Thursday. We are going to have
same bat channel.
Same back time. We'll be here Thursday at 8:00. Mark Guggenheim will be on the show. We are going to talk about a lot, I'm sure. You can pick topics. He's a wonderful person. I'm very excited to get him on the show. He was very excited to be on the show. And I want to thank everybody. I want to thank everybody for being here. Again, make sure if you haven't already, subscribe to wherever you're watching this, so you'll know that when we go live, and we will be live pretty much every Tuesday going forward, and some Thursdays that we can get. We're done.
All right.
I'll see you in 2 days.
Thank you, folks, for being here. We will see you on Thursday. Well, we won't really see you, but you can see us on Thursday.
Sounds great.
All right. Take it easy.
See you later.